Good evening, everyone. Happy Thursday. It's great to see you all and to be back for our last night of the Great Sustainable Seafood Tour. But not to worry, you can still enjoy wonderful sustainable seafood across the country with our restaurant partners. Do check that out on our website, saintsupery/seafood. And this might give you some great ideas for your recipe contest submittal. That's coming up now pretty soon here too. So start practicing on your friends, have some guests over safely, and practice those sustainable seafood recipes, because it's a great prize to come and win a visit to us. Todd will probably make you lunch. Great things like that can happen when you win the Great Sustainable Seafood Contest. In July, we're going to kick off with the Thrill of the Grill on July 1st. That will give you just the right amount of time to get warmed up for the 4th of July barbecue season and be ready to go. Todd, as always, will have lots of tips and tricks. We'll have special guests. We'll have people from around the country showing you the best way to put on that barbecue. And followed by drinking like a pro. All of us at Saint Supery know how to drink like a pro. So it's one of the things that we do best around here, other than grow and make great wine. So we're looking forward to seeing you again in July and August. Lots of fun things coming up. But you all know the program. Stay muted, ask questions on the chat, raise your hand if you want to jump on and ask questions live and in person. So great to have you here. Nice to see David with us as well, joining from Savannah. Thank you for joining us. And let's pop over to Michael Garcia there at Parcel 10. A beautiful day in the vineyard. Nice and cool weather we've got here for a few days. 72 degrees. Looks like the live webcam isn't so live, but you had a pretty cold night there last night, didn't you?
It was close to 32, if not 32 in some spots, Emma. So, and abnormally cool for June, but we'll take 72 in the daytime. It's a beautiful day here.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I guess your phone's not going to overheat today. It's a lucky day. So tell us what's been going on in the vineyard since last week. What you got going on?
Yeah, so we talked before about our wire movement and our canopy positioning. With that, we've continued to plant parcel 11, so we're getting close to completion on our parcel 11 Cabernet, and we're starting to drop fruit too. So we've taken a few clips here, and this is an example of us shoot positioning in the canopy. So we're lifting our set of wires and then tucking shoots within those wires to get our canopy vertical, to get good sun exposure, not too much, not too little, like we've talked about before on the fruit, and allowing our tractors to drive down these rows efficiently. So we've got quite a bit going on.
Well, it looks like you're pretty far ahead on that pulling the wires, and just in time, because it has been windy here, and we don't want those great, nice green shoots doing all their photosynthesis getting broken off. So definitely windy here in the Napa Valley the last few days. How are the clusters coming along?
They're sizing up well, depending on variety. The earlier varieties and the hillsides that flowered early are sizing up. We like to call them pea-sized berries when they get to about the size of a pea, obviously, and then the clusters start to close. And depending on the variety and the amount of fruit that was set on the vine, some of the clusters will close tightly completely, leaving them at some risk of fungal issues, kind of bunch rot. Not so much on our sites, more so in cooler coastal sites, but we always want to be aware of that. And some of the clusters that are more loosely structured, some clones of Cabernet clone 6 that we have a little bit of out here, we really don't have to worry about that. The berries hang apart from each other, but it's an exciting time of the year as they start to fall into place and we see what the crop looks like.
Yeah, it feels like the season is just zooming along. And I know as soon as we start harvest, I feel like it's harvest and then it's Christmas because we just don't stop, right? Until Christmas time and the last tank is done fermenting. But it feels like we're on a rapid run towards harvest and that it'll be a little bit of an early season this year. So you're also starting to leaf. How's that going?
Leafing is it's going well. We in some areas we have good sized canopies, and so we're being careful to remove the leaves that are in contact with clusters. Depending on the exposure, we don't want to leaf too much and leave clusters open to the sun. So we're leafing only a shaded side or a side that's getting less sun exposure during the day. But we're starting to leaf and we're starting to drop a little bit of fruit, so things aren't contacting each other, and we're getting the fruit positioned right where we want it to be.
Great. Well, we've got two wines today. We've got our Rutherford Merlot, obviously from the Rutherford Vineyard, but we also have the Elu that we're tasting today, the 2015 Elu, and that, of course, is from the Dollarhide Ranch and the Rutherford Vineyard, and really a reflection of the season and a reflection of the best of the red Bordeaux varietals from those two vineyards. Do you want to talk about the different soils and how it is growing those grapes on those two very different properties?
Sure. Yeah. In Rutherford, as we know, we're right up against the Napa River. So our soils are alluvial and fluvial derived. They have a little bit higher organic matter. They're mostly loam, but we get into some slightly clay loam areas, which means that these soils will have higher water holding capacity. And our rootstock selection reflects that. So Rutherford is planted on primarily a rootstock called 10114. This is derived from a wild grape called Vitis riparia. And Vitis riparia, as the name suggests, grows in riparian areas. The roots are more shallow rooted than other rootstocks, and that kind of affects how we manage this property. We need to have water where these roots can access it. Obviously, they're very deeply rooted. We probably could dry farm it. The water is readily available there. But in a year like this, where we didn't get much rainfall, how much water is on this 10114 rootstock becomes a consideration. And that's in contrast to these hillsides like the one I'm standing on here in Dollarhide. It's a lot of fractured shale. The drainage is very good. And a lot of these rootstocks are derived from a wild species called Vitis rupestris. It grows in very arid canyons and climates, and so it's super deep rooted. And while we do need to, watch its water needs, the roots on these hillsides are extremely deep, and some of these old vines can really hold their own as they search for water. So the management it differs between the two properties.
Yeah, and you've also got a pretty distinct difference in elevation. I mean, we're almost at sea level in Rutherford, and where you are, you're what, at 900, 1,000 feet of elevation there on 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
that
definitely creates a temperature difference too you're dealing with.
It does, yeah. The diurnal shift, I mean, we saw it last night getting down to close to 32, but it aids in the acid retention of the fruit, and it differs. The shift here is elevation based, while the shift in Rutherford might be a little bit more marine based or ocean based, since we're down there closer to the bay on the Napa Valley floor. So
yeah, that's a really good point. Well, it looks like it's still going to stay dry, just like we always do in this Mediterranean climate zone this time of year. But looks like the vineyard is healthy, and we're going to have a nice, we'll have a delicious harvest and a great harvest and an early harvest. That's that we just all have to keep thinking that, because we're farmers and there's weather, but we've got a couple more months to go till we start, but it looks like it's moving along really well. Thanks, Michael. Let's jump over to Michael Scholes, our VP of Viticulture and Winemaking at the winery today, and hear a little bit about these two wines. And oh, sorry. Yeah, Harold is asking a question. Is the Elu always from Dollarhide? Harold, the Elu is always from both vineyards. So it's both Dollarhide and Rutherford. So let's jump over to Mr. Scholes and hear a little bit about that and how he makes those varietal and vineyard selections.
Yeah, hi there, Emma. So we've got a couple of wines today that to check out, which are fun wines. The Merlot, of course, is a Rutherford designated wine. So it's obviously we have two estates, Rutherford and Dollarhide, as discussed here today. And this wine comes from Rutherford. We grow all of our Merlot here at Rutherford. And the reason is that it performs very well here. Rutherford is suited to the varietal, so we grow it in this location. And Merlot is a really terrific varietal in the fact that it's a little more approachable than some robust Cabernets, more round, has good structure and a serious red wine, but sometimes a little more gentle, yet it's very plump in the center. So it's got some nice qualities to it with Merlot. This particular Merlot, of course, has had a bit of barrel fermentation, which is terrific. That's a barrel fermentation we've been doing some parts of that for quite a few years now, and sometimes we are able to thread that into blends, and it contributes a nice integrated structural component that really makes the wine more complex and more interesting. So that's part of the things that we're going with Merlot here, Emma.
Okay, and so so the 2016 Merlot, which some people have, is about 29% whole berry barrel fermented in new French oak barrels, and it's got a little bit of other varieties in there too. I think you've got in the 2016. Is that correct?
In the 2016, yeah. So we've got a little Cabernet, a little Cabernet Franc, and some Petit Verdot. So 6, 4, and 2% respectively are there. So Merlot is, as I said, got typically a very scented wine with good plumpness. It has nice structure, but a little more gentle. Sometimes that it can then be enhanced by a little more of those structuring components. And those three wines actually are structuring varietals like Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and certainly Petit Verdot. They're structuring wines. So Petit Verdot particularly is a very powerful, very, very significant structured wine with significant tannin and so forth. In fact, there's only 2% in there, and that's with reason. We typically don't want to overdo that component, but Merlot can be enhanced by a little of those varietals in our situation, certainly. Yes.
Yeah, and so those are all from Rutherford as well, because this is a single vineyard wine, and that has to be 95% from the vineyard, but I believe it's 100%. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, it's all from Rutherford. So we grow those four varietals at the Rutherford Estate. So Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot are all grown on the Rutherford property, which is where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Question from Harold: is there any significant difference with the 2017 that he's drinking today?
Yeah, typically what will happen is we'll change up the variety. That little blender in the background won't always be exactly identical, but generally the concept is the same. So we're normally going to be sitting around 90%, sometimes even more than 90% Merlot on this blend, and the other blenders will make up. In this case, there's 12% of other blenders, but sometimes we're only using 6 or 7%. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is the same vineyard, but we had a little bit different season in 17. We had a lot of heat spikes than we did in 16. Any other sort of comments between the difference in the season between 16 and 17?
Yes, 16.
And maybe 15 while you're at that, because some of us are drinking 15 Elu.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about that. So, the 16 was a very dry winter and into spring. So we had very dry conditions in 2016, and hence with a warm spring, but yet a moderate summer. It wasn't extreme, whereas and that sort of led to very structured wines. So when you have dry winters, that often leads to structured wines, and you have moderate summers, that enhances that a little bit. And in 2017, we actually had a very warm summer, so quite a warm summer, and that was a very different climatic approach compared to the 2016. The 2015, we had sort of a moderate sort of winter. January, February was warm, but we had good rainfall across the December January period. But then spring ended up being quite dry, and the summer was fairly warm in 2015. So variations, and we are an estate brand at St. Supri, so every time you try our wines, are coming from the same blocks, the same plants, but that's the big difference, and why we date stamp these wines is seasons vary, and with variation, with a different season comes variation in wine. Even though you keep as much as you can tight and consistent, which we do, you still respect the season because there's a story to tell.
Yeah. And, I think we're really blessed with a lot of great seasons, except the one that we'll forget from last year. But we have been blessed with a lot of great seasons year after year, which is nice with that climate that we have here in Napa Valley. So we're also tasting tonight the Elu. And Harold had asked a little bit about the varietals and growing them on each property. Michael Garcia talked about the soil in each location. Perhaps you can comment on the difference that you see in the Cabernet and the Petit Verdot between the properties, and sort of how you come about this blend, which is delicious.
So over time, you sort of realize that some varietals grow better at certain locations. And so, and sometimes it takes time to work that out. And we have worked that out over time. We've realised that our Merlot performs exceptionally well at Rutherford, but maybe not so much at Dollarhide, because it's just a different sort of more extreme soils with some of that shallow topsoils, higher elevation, more of them with that fractured shale that Michael talked about, and so forth. So, but Merlot grows very well in Rutherford, where our soils are just a little more generous. And what have you, but both sites can grow Cabernet, but the Cabernets are different. So Cabernet in Rutherford here typically will exude what they talk about, that Rutherford dust, which is that fine grained tannin. So you like wines that can be very dense, very structured, but they also have some sort of elegance to the grain of tannin, a bit of a dusty sort of approach, but very interesting and what have you, and unique to Rutherford. Dollarhide, on the other hand, that's going to create a mountain style Cabernet. And when I say mountain style, I mean, high elevation typically creates Cabernets that have more robust, bold structure. So you feel that tannin, it's more apparent, it's more present, and what have you. But both of them are good Cabernets. They're just different approaches. And Petit Verdot will do a similar sort of thing, and what have you. So when we look at the Elu as a blend, we look at we take the opportunity that we have here at St. Supri to utilize both of our estates in one wine. And so therefore we can take the strengths of various varieties and pull them together to create a wine that's quite round, quite complete, quite dense, yet quite sort of supple, quite elegant at the same time, which is sort of the goal with the Elu, is what we do. But yes, by recognizing the strengths of the properties, we can utilize all of those components to create a very interesting, very complex, and a very sort of exciting wine. And we do that, and we can incorporate in this wine a little bit of Dollarhide Cabernet and maybe a ounce of Rutherford Cabernet in this wine. The Cabernets can contribute, but there will be slightly different contributions. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the wine is certainly delicious. There's just layers of flavor. It's just plump and full on the palate. It's absolutely fantastic. Really enjoying that. And it is kind of one of my go-to seafood wines, as well as the Rutherford Merlot. And I really enjoy that. I know you do a lot of grilling of fish on the barbecue. A preference from you, Michael, on what you like to pair as a red wine and how with your fish?
Oh, yeah. So I think it depends how you prepare your fish, whether you prepare it with sauces and what have you, and which sort of fish, whether it's salmon, which is a big flavour, and what have you. But, of these wines, actually, either of these wines you can pair with it. I typically like to pair the Merlot. Yeah, that's generally. But, I eat whitefish and also salmon, of course, but salmon more regularly. So I'm quite a salmon fan.
Well, that's good, because we have with us Tim Berg from the Great Alaskan Seafood Company that he and his wife are owners of there in Alaska. And so it's very exciting to have Tim with us today. And he has been up there in Alaska shipping direct to consumer. Almost 99% of their fish is shipped across the United States and Canada, direct to consumer from their fishermen to your dining table. And I'm excited to have Tim with us to talk about the sustainable farming and fishing that they do, or sustainable fishing there, wild fishing, with the Marine Stewardship Council certification that they have. So let's jump over to Tim, and welcome, Tim. Thanks so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. This is a real pleasure to be with you.
Oh, there we go. We lost you for a second. So Tim, you know, you are also a great fisherman and guide. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into the business?
Sure. You know, I was born and raised in Napa, and when I graduated from Justin High, I went to Sac State for a couple years, and then I decided to move north. I had to Alaska because I always loved to hunt and fish. So that's kind of how I ended up in Alaska on the Kenai Peninsula. And once I was up here, I started guiding people, taking them out for salmon. The particular area that I moved to, the Kenai Peninsula, has a river that has the very largest salmon in the world, which are the Kenai River King salmon. And it was here that the world record was caught, which was 97 pounds. So in addition to that, we just have waters here that are full of fish: halibut, giant halibut, lingcod, yellow eye, snapper. It's just a wonderful area, and it's if you love seafood, it's the place to be.
Absolutely. Well, I had the pleasure of meeting you and Carol the first time a number of years ago, and you had donated an amazing selection of seafood from Alaska to our hospice collaborative care here in the Napa Valley. And I know it raised a lot of money and has been really wonderful way to help people experience dignity at the end point of their lives, and some great care that they also provide here in Napa. So thank you for that generosity. Hopefully we'll see some of you in September for the Collaborative Care Hospice auction and golf tournament back down here in Napa Valley. But Tim, tell us a little bit about how Alaskan fish is sustainably caught and managed.
Well, here in Alaska, we find that our fisheries are so important and so valuable to all the local people. So the Department of Fish and Game monitors and regulates every one of our fisheries on a day-to-day basis. So like take the Copper River salmon run. It's been closed for almost 10 days, but we just got good news. The fishery just reopened up, and we're going to have fresh Copper River Kings and sockeyes tomorrow. So what they do, the way they monitor this is they actually have sonar counters and fish wheels in each of the river systems. And on a day-by-day basis, they count the amount of fish entering these river systems. And that's the brood stock. That's the fish that get into the river are the ones that are going to spawn. And they have a targeted number for each river system of how many fish they need up the river before they allow the fishermen to actually fish. And if they see that the run isn't coming along at the pace they want it to be, they'll just close things down for a few days, and then they'll reopen it up. So all the fisheries, whether it's salmon or if it's our halibut fisheries, they're all highly regulated. There's permits involved in order to be a commercial fisherman, and everyone expects closures every season to regulate the run. And be sure we have fish for the future. Very important.
Well, I've had Copper River salmon. I've been fortunate enough to have Copper River salmon, and it is absolutely delicious. And one of the things that I was surprised to learn was that fish are like college students. They go away, they go for thousands of miles, and then they come back exactly to the same river where they spawned before. And I think that that's how you're keeping that same genetic stock in the Copper River that you had. And so that the only reason they're coming back is they came from that, they were spawned in that location. So tell us about how that differs from ocean farming fishing.
From ocean farming?
Oh, ocean fishing, from fishing. From the fishing. Sorry, got a little echo there.
Sure. So we have, we process and buy and sell salmon from all different areas of Alaska. Copper River is just one of those areas. We also buy fish that are called troll caught king salmon, and these are caught in the ocean on hook and line. And those salmon, really their origin is undetermined because they're out in the ocean swimming around with salmon from different river systems. But troll caught kings are very, very good because they're caught one at a time on hook and line. When those fish are brought on board, they get the complete attention of the crew on board. So they're bled and they're iced and taken very good care of. So those are our troll caught fish. We have some of the kings we catch are also called white kings, troll white kings, which have a different flavor profile, kind of real creamy, more like a yellowtail, like a tuna. So we have those, and we have our local salmon, which are caught right outside our plant where our plant's located. Those are called Calgon Island salmon, and we get Calgon Island kings and Calgon Island sockeyes and Calgon Island coho salmon. So those are just a few of the different fisheries we're involved with. But on our local fish right here next to the plant, we work with just several different families that actually fish for us. And they take very special care of the fish that they catch for us. And in turn, we pay them. We pay them more money for our fish, but they have to, bleed them as soon as they're caught. They have to ice them, and they have to deliver them to us the same day that they're caught. So it works for all of us. We pay more for our fish, but we get a lot better quality than you're going to find elsewhere.
Well, and as we've learned in the past as part of this series, that rapid freezing is super important to having quality frozen fish. I mean, the technology we have today is very different than we had 30 years ago. I mean, we're really getting fantastic frozen fish. Any tips on frozen fish? I know you ship a great variety of fish all over the country, and it's frozen. Tips on defrosting and how you like to prepare frozen fish?
Sure. Well, I want to touch on is there's a couple different types of frozen fish. So you have the fish that we freeze. You got to remember, when you thaw your fish out, it's only going to be as good as when it was actually frozen. So our fish typically will be frozen the same day they were caught. Where a lot of the frozen fish on the market are going to be fish that were caught 3 or 4 days before they're processed and actually flash frozen. So that being said, the best way that we like to thaw our salmon is to take our salmon the night before, actually puncture the vacuum seal on the bags, and then just thaw them in our refrigerator. The other way to do it is, like you get home from work and you want to have salmon for dinner, is to just take a bowl of water, cold running water in your sink, and just put your fish in there. Don't puncture the bag, and within about 30 minutes it'll be ready to prepare. So there's a couple of different ways.
Yeah, I think that refrigerator method is definitely a Chef Todd favorite. I'm not sure why I'm getting a lot of feedback, but it's a little unusual. Hopefully it isn't hitting everybody. But I do love the Copper River salmon and all the fish and king crab legs that you provide, and we appreciate you doing that in a sustainable manner. And I know you include shipping on 8 pounds or more anywhere across the country, so it's a great way to stock the freezer and have great sustainable fish all the time. in your fish. Do you have favorite wines that you like to pair with the fish, Tim?
Well, typically we're going to, go with a white wine, but on occasion we do a red wine. And one favorite that we have in our family and friends is a cedar plank coho salmon. So we do a lot of cedar plank cooking up here. And when we used to have our fishing lodges, that was one of the, one of the big dishes. And I think with that, Merlot goes really well, and also Pinot. But definitely cedar plank with red wine is a big hit.
Yeah, excellent tip. And one of the kind of fun things that we've been looking at with wild caught salmon and having salmon across the country is we've talked very often here. I mean, most of you have been on before, and you've seen our optical sorter and our hand sorting system. But one of the things you may not have seen is in the US and in locations where dams have been built is there's a salmon cannon to help bring the fish up the river where they can no longer spawn, because those fish are coming back to that same location where they were born, and that's where they're ready to spawn. And so the whoosh salmon cannon is quite amazing and gets the fish where they're trying to go. And one of the fascinating things that we found out about this is it also does get photographed and directed either back or to where it was intending to go if it is an invasive species. So we're getting a salmon cannon and a salmon sorting simultaneously to get those fish up into their spawning grounds. So just kind of a lot of fun, and another correlation between great sustainable seafood and making great wine. So it's fun to see the whoosh cannon. Do check that out on the internet. Ryan will post that for you. Pretty cool technology, but also, utilizing sorting technology to get the right fish where they're supposed to go. And speaking of fish and lots of delicious things, let's pop over to the kitchen, check out what Chef Todd is making tonight with this delicious Alaskan salmon and fantastic Rutherford Merlot and Elu. So Todd, what do you have for us tonight?
Hi, well, I definitely have some fantastic wild Alaskan salmon. Tim, this might even be from you, I don't know, but it happens to be some Copper River sockeye salmon that I found locally here in one of the markets. I know it's a really kind of a special treat, and it's one of those things that are a seasonal type of thing that comes and goes in short seasons. So when it is around, it's a fantastic, wild, sustainable product to capitalize on. So I'm happy to utilize that. We talk a lot about farm products that are trying to keep sustainability. I always say that my first and foremost sustainable is to find the best wild caught or local or in season seafood first, and then I'll look during the off seasons to the farms that are doing a really good job with aquaculture and things like that. So what I have is some really beautiful Copper River sockeye salmon, which is kind of hard to find. Tim was mentioning the season kind of opens and closes, and it's short, and they're really watching the quantity of fish that are fished from there, so it's not overfished. But I have some really nice deep sockeye. You can tell that the color of it is darker than you might find from king salmon. The sizes tend to be typically smaller, and it also has that kind of a deeper, darker kind of a color, as well as the flesh that's a little bit stronger. It's kind of meaty, if I could describe it that way. So I think this is going to work well because I am intentionally, purposely pairing this to go with our Merlot. And I think it's a great match. You'll find a lot of times people say, which red wine would you have with salmon? And they naturally kind of gravitate towards Merlot. And I think ours works really well with this. Some of the really cool ingredients that I have that are kind of trendy as well. I'll show you a little close up on these. These are some things that chefs are using quite often now in the kitchens. And so you might find us with some really cool stuff. Like, for instance, this is called black garlic. So it is fermented black garlic. It is aged intense, right? You can imagine what fresh garlic looks like. And after taking that garlic and basically like dehydrating it, allowing it to essentially kind of change naturally. It goes through an enzymatic browning process, this Maillard reaction, gets it really dark and nutty and caramely, and it adds this intense flavor. So it goes through a fermentation process as well. So it's adding that kind of intensity of flavor and rich umami. So that is one product that you can find. You can probably look online and just Google black garlic, fermented black garlic, and you can buy this, and it will last if you put it into your refrigerator. They're already nice and soft. You can just kind of crush them down into the paste, and that's what you're looking for. The other fun ingredient, and something that is near and dear to me that I always keep in my kitchens, is some miso paste. And this one happens to be red miso paste, dark and intense, that rusty red kind of color. It is aged longer. It is a little bit more salty and intense in flavor. It has more depth than your white miso paste that you might find used for your miso soup and other lighter kind of preparations. I use both of them, and I try to keep them in my kitchens, not only at work, but also at home, because there's some really fantastic flavors that are in there. So by utilizing these, they both go through the fermentation process. This one happens to have the koji in there that gives it that fantastic umami and that richness that goes with it. But another thing I'm going to do here is add some aromatics into this. And let me just show you kind of a little bit of a close-up. Staying with the kind of Asian flavors and Asian theme, I have some fresh ginger root right here. Works fantastic as far as a little spice. I have some green onions and the grated ginger. I also have a little lemon that I can finish with. And then a couple other ingredients I'm going to use to add a little flavor to this paste that I'm going to make is some soy sauce and some rice vinegar, and then also some lemon juice. So I'm going to add those ingredients into essentially what I'm making is a red miso and black garlic, kind of a red wine paste. And that's going to be smeared over on top of this beautiful piece of the sockeye salmon. And I'm going to bake it in the oven. So I've preheated my oven up to about 400 degrees. I want it to kind of cook at a quick temperature where it also gets a little bit of the nuttiness coming from the browning of that crust that's over the top there. So what I have initially, and I've kind of already started it, is some red wine. So if you happen to have some of our extra red wine, want to use some, it could be about a cup worth there. I'm going to go in with some of the green onions as well as some of the ginger. And as that kind of cooks down, it will soften, it will impart its flavor into that red wine base. And then I'm going to put in some of the black garlic that's been kind of crushed down. All right, now as this kind of cooks, it reduces down, it will concentrate in flavor, it will soften all those ingredients until it cooks down from, let's say, 1 cup all the way down to about 1/4 of a cup to 1/8 of a cup. And immediately I can smell those green onions and the ginger in there, as well as that nutty, sweet black garlic. So that's going to be a really intense kind of a flavor. It's going to add some depth, and it will allow it to kind of bridge and bring that salmon in together with the glass of Merlot that you have there. So I'm going to go ahead and cook that down. You want to kind of take your time on it and not cook it too fast to the point where it scorches, but you do want it to kind of concentrate and cook down for a while. So I would keep it at a very low little bubble, if you can see that, just like that, and it'll concentrate down. So number one, you've got red wine in there. It's going to cook down. It'll intensify the flavor of that wine. It will burn off the alcohol, and it will also add a real nice kind of acidic background to it. So again, it's kind of, even though you're adding a lot of umami into this dish, and the fish itself is full of umami and wonderful, rich salmon oils and omega-3s, you also have some acid to kind of cut through that. So if you add too much umami, as well as the miso and the fish itself and the miso paste in there, then you need to make sure that you balance it out with some sodium, some salt. In this case, there's soy sauce in there, but there's also a healthy amount of acid to it. So between the acid in the wine that's concentrated and the rice wine vinegar that I'm going to finish with, even the lemon wedge that I'm going to put onto the plate, it will help to kind of tame down some of the interactions you might have, where too much umami can sometimes accentuate some of the tannins and bring out the aggressiveness of the wine. You want it to be nice and well balanced. And so this should be a fantastic dish to do that with. So as this cooks down, yes?
Question, are you particular about which red wine you use for reduction?
No, I mean, of course, I'm fortunate here to have plenty of wine to choose from. I'm obviously not opening the most expensive bottle. It is a cooking level wine. So if you happen to have an inexpensive bottle and you want to save your favorite Saint-Sucre bottle for actually eating and consuming and drinking with it, then by all means, go ahead and do that. If you have some wine that maybe has been open for a couple of days that you didn't happen to finish that bottle of red wine, maybe 2 days open and it's kind of losing its luster, then go ahead and use that for the cooking as well. So now this paste you can actually make up ahead of time. You can keep it refrigerated, airtight, put it in a small container and use it as you wish. I'm using it on the salmon itself, but you could definitely use it on other fish or seafood or other ways as well. So as this cooks and concentrates down, when it gets really strong, the garlic is softened, the green onions and the ginger have kind of softened as well. What I'm going to do then, after it kind of reduces down strong enough, is I'll go ahead and put in the miso paste by just kind of whisking it in there. And this is about 3 tablespoons worth for that 1 cup that I started with. And I don't want to necessarily cook the miso paste. So that's why I'm adding it towards the end. It'll help to kind of bloom it. This is intense and kind of thick in texture. So this will kind of wake up all those wonderful miso characteristics that you pick up. Again, I'm not adding any salt to this because we've got plenty of salt and natural sodium from that fermentation process and from the concentration of everything. And so that's going to warm through gently like that. And then when it's thick like that as a paste, I'm going to put in just a little bit of soy sauce. That's going to add a bit more love, as well as a couple tablespoons probably worth of some rice vinegar. Now, once you've got that concentrated, there's no need to continue cooking it down any further. What I will do from here is very carefully, if it's a small quantity like this, you want to blend it so that you get all the goodies out of the garlic, you get the ginger, and you get the green onions to all blend. So that's kind of what it's looking like. It's got that deep kind of a lacquer. You can tell that there's a black garlic in there. That red miso adds a depth of color, but you can also really still kind of pick up that concentration of the red wine in there because it was basically cooked down almost to a syrup by the time you're done there. So now with this, if you happen to have maybe what we call an immersion blender or a stick blender, this is a great one if you can actually get it in there. If you've got a small quantity, you could also put it into a food processor. But what you want to do is just blend it all up so it's nice and smooth. And then you end up with a really nice paste. And I'll show you what mine looks like here at the end so you can see. So that process may take anywhere from 10, 15 minutes, depending on how big of a batch you're making, how long it takes you to simmer that wine down gently, and to kind of rehydrate and soften the garlic and all the other ingredients. So here's what you end up with. And I'll do you a little close up right there. There's the beautiful pureed, finished version of this red wine and red miso kind of a paste. And you can see it's fairly thick, but it's smooth. You can even strain it if you have a fine strainer. Yeah, you could strain it after you blend it with that stick blender, or if you put it into your blender, your Cuisinart or your food processor, you can blend it from there. Now from here, again, you can keep it cold, refrigerated, put plastic over the top, and it will last a good long time. So from here, we know that we have our oven that's preheated. And so all you need to do is basically take your fish, your salmon, and I'm going to use just this one piece here. And what I want to do is put a nice little coating right over the top. I usually pat the fish dry really well just initially to make sure that some of the water is not coming up to the top. I'm going to do a nice coating over the top. If you have a little bit of time, I would definitely recommend letting this kind of marinate for a while. It'll start to permeate the top of the flesh.
Half hour, hour?
Yeah, maybe up to an hour to even 2. You could get away with that. Because basically it's just the top, it's just the top coating on there. So you're not submerging it, the whole fish into this. It is pretty intense. If you were to taste this on its own, it's pretty strong, right? You've got that concentration and everything, and it's designed to be used as a glaze just like this. And so that's why I'm only putting it only on the top so that you don't cover up too much of the beautiful flavor of that wonderful fish itself. So now from there, if you have a pan, maybe a little bit of neutral oil, you want to just be able to go ahead and put that on and go straight into your oven. And depending on the thickness of your fish, mine's fairly thin. This won't take very long to cook, but in that hot oven, it will toast up and kind of crust a little bit of that miso glaze over the top, but it'll also cook the fish fairly quickly so it stays nice and moist inside. And if you wanted medium rare, you know, you can kind of tell by touching. It's hard to get a temperature probe thermometer in there, I'm sure. But if you want it to be a little bit on the underside, definitely pull it out, let it sit for a bit, kind of a little bit of carryover cooking in there. So it'll be nice and moist and juicy on the inside. So into the 400-degree hot oven. And then, of course, with my Zoom camera or my Zoom oven, I'll show you what I've made up already in advance so we can finish one up for you here.
And Todd, any other types of fish that you would suggest?
Oh, sure. Not just salmon, but salmon is a fantastic and a pretty well-known pairing as far as a selection of seafood. But if you had a hearty type of a fish, I'm thinking something maybe that has some real kind of intensity of flavor, depth of flavor, like salmon does. You know, you can tell that the texture of the fish is kind of meaty, so it works well. So anything that's along those same lines, it could be something maybe like a striped bass, a sea bass, maybe sturgeon, something like that. It has a little bit of oil content without being too rich, too oily. You could do something like that and it would work out pretty well. I would say that you might even want to try maybe some steelhead. That might be a nice way to do it. So you can see this beautiful fish right here. It's got that glaze over it that's kind of crusted up a bit, and the salmon still has some nice moisture. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on. Now that little bit there is pretty good. If you want to put a little bit more sauce onto the plate for your decoration or garnish, you can definitely do that as well. But it should be pretty nice. And any other kind of garnishes that you want to put with this would be fantastic. If you want to serve it with some steamed rice, that's what it's screaming out to me, but that's my kind of soul food that I would always be looking for. I do happen to have just some shaved vegetables that I pickled lightly with some rice vinegar. Again, using the acid in there and the crunch and the rawness and the water in there. It'll be a nice kind of a relief for this dish. So you can just garnish with that. But you can do any type of vegetables, anything that's got some nice, clean, refreshing type of flavors would be really good with that.
Oh, beautiful. I'm also thinking snap peas would be great.
Snap peas, fantastic. Yes, matches with a lot of those flavors. There's a little bit of a edible nasturtium, little pepperiness in there. Some chive blossoms that I happen to have. There's chives in the side salad there. So anything for a little bit of color. And with those carrots that I have in there, there's also a little bit of the carrot tops or carrot fronds that you could put on as well. So any kind of like decoration just for aesthetics to make it look beautiful. Should be pretty tasty on its own as it is. Any other type of, you know, rice that you want to serve on the side, any pasta or anything like that would go really great with this. But I think if you have that along with the glass of the Merlot, you got that intense nuttiness going on there from the black garlic and that fermented characteristic that's so strong in there. I think that'd be really delicious. So hopefully if you give that a try, let me give you a quick, kind of a close-up shot on it there.
Beautiful.
And fairly easy, you know, you just want to coat it, let it marinate for a bit, and then just bake it in the oven according to how far you actually want it to be done.
And Hazel and Lupe are both, you're amazing. It's beautiful. And I have to second and third them. That is gorgeous, Todd. What a beautiful creation. And I know it's going to be delicious. Other tips that we can do at home to expand our red wine repertoire with sustainable seafood?
Well, so you notice that one thing that I did, because it may not be one of those things that are natural go-to, right? You think of seafood, it comes from the ocean, tends to be a little lighter and has sometimes intense oil or fishy flavors to them. And so you think, well, maybe that might not be a good match with red wines. Our red wines happen to have fantastic acids, so they help clean and finish with every bite that or sip that you have, kind of resets your palate on there. But you'll notice that what I did was I used some of the red wine in this actual reduction. So that concentration, that glaze has red wine in it. It kind of creates a little bit of this bridge. So when you taste it and smell it and see it in there, it actually goes, when you have it in your mouth with a sip of the wine, it creates a bridge. And another thing that you could do, I've got recipes, and I think I've used this before in some of the demos, is to make a red wine compound butter or a red wine butter sauce, a Beurre Rouge, meaning red butter, or a compound butter that has a red wine reduction in it. And you can find that recipe on our website under the recipe section there. If you have that, you concentrate down some red wine, you can put herbs and shallots in there, whatever you like, and then keep that in a compound butter, kind of like on a roll or a tube. You can add a pat of that butter on top, and that will also help as far as creating a natural bridge in sense to the glass of wine that you're having.
Oh, excellent. Lots of wonderful ideas for us to head back to the kitchen with. Thank you, Todd. I'm really looking forward to grilling with your direction, because that is a skill I do not have, yet another one. But I'm looking forward to that and learning a little bit more when we kick back off again July 1st. Thank you for all the wonderful tips, and a big thank you to Tim Berg from the Great Alaskan Seafood Company. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us and helping us learn a little bit more about wild, sustainable seafood fishing. We appreciate that. And thank you all, as always, for joining us. It's great to see you all. And we look forward to seeing you at the winery or out and about and around the country soon. So thanks for joining us. And until we see you next time, be well, be kind, and cheers. See you soon.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you, Tim.
Oh, nice picture, Tim.
Looking good, Emma.
Nice to see you, Dad.
Good to see you, honey. You take care.
Here. It's cold here.
Oh, it's 100 here.
That's okay. You can keep the heat for now.
That's true. Yeah, this is our first day of 100 or more, so